Hello. Welcome to the Nothing is Wasted podcast. I'm so grateful that you are joining us yet again for another great episode right here on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. Today we have a new friend of ours, Olivia Gerber, and we were just so honored to have her on. In fact, Olivia and I met, and we've had a couple of these recently where it's just been kind of meeting some people along the journey. That's actually how the podcast started. I don't know if you know that, but the podcast began because in my own healing journey, I was meeting other people along the journey, along the road, along my own healing journey. And I was meeting people who had faith because they were watching God show up in their story in ways that could not be explained, that it could only be experienced. And as they would try to explain that to me, I began to borrow their faith when I felt lacking faith of my own. At the time, I had a blog, and many of you guys were reading that blog. It was more of an update on how I was processing through the death of my wife and our unborn baby, and how I was processing through having to carry the weight of the church by myself, and be a single dad to Weston as a 15-month-old, and all of the things that life was now, what life was now, and all the ways that it was very disorienting and difficult. And so I was writing a blog, I was updating you guys on that. And then as I'm meeting these people, I'm going, man, I'm not carrying myself through this. I'm not the hero of this story. God's carrying me, and he's using so many great people, so many great stories that I'm meeting along the journey. So I want you to hear from them. And that's when we decided to start this podcast. You see, back then, hardly anybody was doing podcasts. This was 2017. So there weren't a whole lot of them out there outside of, I was aware of it, the whole idea of podcasting, because as pastors, we would put our sermons up there. It's kind of a way for our congregants to be able to listen, in between the Sundays if they missed the service, or other people who were wanting to tune into your messages. So we'd been doing that for a little while. And I thought, why don't we just start interviewing people who've gone through some tough stuff and let them give testimony to how God has shown up in their life. And let's all borrow their faith. Not just me. I want you guys to hear from all of these people, because they're the heroes of this story. They're the guides that are carrying me through. And so that's how this all began. So it's very sweet to meet people along the journey and go, oh my goodness, you got to share your story. You got to share your story. Olivia and I met at a conference. We were both a part of this conference as like sponsors for this conference. Often we go as a ministry to pastors' conferences to help them see what we can do to help them as they're helping people heal. So we have our course, Pain to Purpose, that we launch in churches all over the country. And so we were there promoting this course. I was doing a little speaking portion at the conference, ministry moment. They were sharing our story. And we met Olivia. She came up to our booth and she said, hey, I've been listening to the podcast. And she actually had a booth right across from us. She was there with Compassion International, I believe. And she said, it's been really encouraging to just follow your journey and to listen to this podcast. And I heard her story. I said, you've got to come and share your story on the podcast, because for many of us, our pain becomes this like one event, this like single moment of tragedy or devastating loss that just kind of upends our lives. And then we have to navigate that and go, where does my life go from here? What's the direction that I'm choosing from this moment? But for some of us, our pain is actually quite different. Our pain is a slow, relentless ache, disease, sickness, chronic pain, chronic illness. And it seems to have no end. And that is really the story that Olivia is bringing here today. In fact, we were on our 5 steps to taking back our story call that I do every single month. And someone asked me about this. Hey, how do I suffer well when it doesn't seem like there's any end to my suffering? And in today's episode, Olivia invites us to wrestle with the tension between believing that God can heal in an instant, which he can, and then learning to trust him when healing comes slowly, or it really doesn't come at all on this side of eternity. How do we still trust God? How do we still lean in? How do we still believe that God's not going to waste an ounce of this pain when the pain is so prevalent, so consistent, such a reminder every single day that it's not going away as far as we can see. Olivia wrote this book out of her journey that she's just recently released. It's called Hold Hope: Encouragement for All Christians with Chronic pain. And it's a collection of letters that Olivia wrote, kind of like to a pen pal, for anybody who is walking through prolonged suffering. And one of the things that really captivated me as Olivia was talking, you'll hear her talk more about this, is this idea of having a manna mindset. A manna mindset. We're trusting for daily grace instead of trying to borrow tomorrow's worries, because anytime we do that, it spoils. And those of you guys who know the story of the Israelites wandering through the wilderness and pleading for bread, God was saying, hey, I'm going to be your provider. You can trust me for it. You don't have to go back to Egypt. And they're like, oh, we had food back there. And God's saying, hey, let me provide for you manna every single day, bread from heaven. It's going to be unlike anything you've ever tasted. It's going to sustain you for today, but you're not going to be able to take any more than what you need for today. If you try to take tomorrow's, it'll spoil. And sure enough, those that tried to take some tomorrow's, they were like maggots that were growing or whatever maggots do, that were spawning that were just crawling around in the manna. So it was rotting, it was spoiling. And that's to remind us that we cannot begin worrying about tomorrow. Jesus said that, right? Today's got enough worries. Trust God for today's grace. He's going to sustain you. He's going to get you through this. Tomorrow, then when tomorrow becomes today, then you can trust him for that day's manna. But for now, let's trust him for today's manna. Olivia's story is incredible. Her spirit is incredible. Her courage, her resilience. You're going to be so encouraged by this, especially if this is your story as well. It's interesting to me, I was thinking about this too, that Job, the devil came to God and God said, have you considered my servant Job? And so God gave him permission to basically take everything from Job. And Job wouldn't curse God. He continued to stay faithful. And so God said, hey, aren't you impressed with my servant? And the devil said, yeah, but you haven't taken his health. So of course he's not going to curse you. Of course he has his own health. You take a man's health, is what the devil said. That's when he's going to curse you. And so even in scripture, Job acknowledges that this is it's a different kind of pain. It's a kind of pain that it can be so debilitating and it can be so disorienting and it can cause a lot of despair. And so that's why I'm so grateful that Olivia joined us today on this conversation to really encourage us. Before we dive into the conversation, a couple things. Pretty soon we're going to be releasing, or at least taking pre-orders for our new devotional Hope in the Valley. And if this conversation encourages you, I want to make sure that you are able to get a copy of that. So stay tuned. We're going to be releasing how you can pre-order Hope in the Valley. It's a 42-day journey. We invited friends of the podcast onto that project to contribute to that project. And so it's I'm excited for you to pick that up. And also, if there are particular pain points that you're navigating right now, grief, widowhood, childhood trauma, sexual betrayal, even chronic pain, we may have developed a curated pathway for you, which is where we bring a collection of all of our resources together and we give those to you surrounding that one pain point. Maybe you don't want to have to sort through all of our episodes, all of our master classes, everything to see which ones pertain to what you're going through. So we've developed a really clean pathway for you. So you can just comb through those so that they can give you some encouragement. Now, listen, all the podcast episodes, all over 400 of them, are going to encourage you, even if it's not the same story as yours. But we do want you to know that you're not the only one going through what you're going through. So we've curated a lot of this content, the conversations we're having, so that you can hear testimony from other people who have gone through what you're going through. 1 Peter 5 tells us, let us not forget there are saints all over the world who are suffering in the same way that we are. And knowing that someone else is in the valley alongside us, with us, knowing that we can even connect with those people, that we can hear their stories, we can borrow their faith, that helps us overcome. So go to nothingiswasted.com/pathways, nothingiswasted.com/pathways, and see if we have a curated pathway for you. You just put in your information, select what pathway you want, and we'll send it right to you. Easy access to all of the episodes we've done surrounding the pain point that you choose. Join me for my next 5 steps to taking back your story, no matter what you've gone through. nothingiswasted.com/start here, nothingiswasted.com/start here to register for that. Well, Olivia, it is so great to have you on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
What a cool connection that you and I found. It was just this providential thing. We're sitting at this conference, both having a booth down in Florida, and and you come up and start talking to us, and turns out that you're familiar with Nothing is Wasted, and then we hear a bit of your story, and we're like, oh my goodness, you got to come and share your story on our podcast. It's so cool what God does.
I know. I love those connections. It's just wild.
Will you tell us a little bit about yourself? Just, kind of give us a little picture of your life right now and what you're doing and what's going on in your world. And then I want to dive into especially this book that you've written and the journey that you've gone on, because I know this journey is going to resonate with so many people who are walking a similar journey. So give us a little bit of your life now, and then we'll draw back.
Yeah, awesome. Well, hey, I'm Olivia, and I am an author, an entrepreneur, and an advocate. And yeah, so I'm just kind of your average girl. My life got flipped upside down by chronic pain, and that's a lot of where my book and writing and really that whole ministry stems from. But kind of outside of that world, I am a newlywed as of January.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So my husband's name is Jack, and we laugh because my name changed right after the book came out, but hey, it's all good. And yeah, so we are just Indiana natives and just moved up north a little further, and that's kind of my life right now.
That's awesome. Those of you guys who are watching this or listening to this and you're familiar with my story, Olivia lives in the same area where my late wife grew up, and it's it is amazing, and I want to use this maybe as a teaching moment for a second, that when we call it a divine flow. When you're in working in God's kingdom, He's going to do these things that look really coincidental or random. And of course, we don't believe that there's anything coincidental. We believe everything is providence. And so when you start to see some of these connections that happen, pay attention, because it means God's working. He's doing something. Lean in a little bit. Go, okay, God, I see what you're doing here. There's some kind of a connection here. So whatever it looks like, these are ways that God propels you through your journey. And so it was just a delight to be able to meet you down in Florida, of all places, the other side of the country, right?
Exactly.
We didn't meet up in northern Indiana. We met in Florida. And then to say, okay, God, what are you up to here? And I'm convinced that as you guys are leaning in and listening and watching this conversation, that you're going to be so encouraged by what Olivia has to share about her own journey. Olivia, share with us a little of your journey, because this book, Hold Hope, I just love the title. Implicit within this title is so much of this idea of literally having to hold on to when it feels like everything's going to be slipping away from you, holding on to hope, encouragement for Christians with chronic pain. So talk to me about your own journey within this that became an inspiration for this.
Yeah. So like I said, just your normal girl. And I was in actually late high school when the earliest symptoms kind of started coming up. And I just noticed that I was having stomach aches a lot. And actually the first symptom was like, I was just dizzy all the time. Like if I would stand up too fast, it was like just this really kind of like a grab onto stuff. Like I was getting really dizzy, and I was like, what's going on? And kind of fast forward, as I got towards the end of high school, I was just getting into a pretty bad spot where every day I was in pain almost all day. And then I started having what we called stomach attacks, which were just these debilitating stomach aches. And one of them actually happened on my college visit to Purdue. And I think that was just an eye-opening moment of like, what's going on here? I actually pulled out of my campus tour to lay on this bench and was just feeling awful. And I was like, my life is not right. My health is messed up. And like, this is about to be my home away from everyone that I know. And I have to figure this out. And I'm a very optimistic person. My life had never really had like ongoing trial like that before. And so I
Yeah.
figured, we'll find the answers. The healthcare people, they'll know what's up. And
Right.
unfortunately, that really wasn't the story. And
Mm.
I started my college journey. They kind of thought it was my gallbladder. And we had this whole plan to move forward, do things the natural way, and that I was going to heal. And finally, I went in for testing to confirm that it was my gallbladder, and
Mm.
everything came back normal. And that was the middle of my freshman year of college. And in that moment, like that's really where I feel like the journey became way more spiritual because it had just been this physical thing. And I always thought there was an escape route. Like I could
Right.
just do surgery if I needed to. But all of a sudden, we did test after test after test, and we were just not getting answers. And I was getting worse.
Mm.
And in some ways, like I felt like the woman in the Gospels where it's like she spent all her money and
Wow.
continually got worse. And it
Yeah.
felt like we were chasing every avenue. And I was just, soon it was headaches and body pain and all of these things. Um, so yeah, and even to today, I guess it's been kind of like unpeeling an onion. And
Mm.
I found some help with a naturalist who actually did an adjustment on my cranial structure that was
Wow.
affecting my stomach
Uh-huh.
valves.
Uh-huh.
Um, Pretty wild treatment.
Yeah.
Your body is just crazy.
Yeah.
Um,
It
but
it
yeah,
is pretty crazy. Yeah. It's not foreign to us. I mean, my wife is a functional
yes.
medicine PA. And so we're very much in a lot of that holistic, some of those
Hmm.
alternate modalities of practice in medicine, but cranial sacral therapy, all that kind of stuff. It just is it's crazy how it can impact you. But when you
Hmm.
don't know some of these things, it can feel so isolating and lonely and going, what in the world? And because a lot of times, to your point, we think Western medicine has answers. Like, we'll just get this done. And
Hmm.
you find that they don't have answers. And you're left going, what is happening?
Yeah. Yeah. And really, that was my experience for so long.
Yeah.
Even now, we're still kind of pulling back some layers of things that just haven't finalized. Just a
Right.
long-standing parasite issue and some other stuff that's not fun to talk about, but it's been my reality.
Right.
Um, but through that, there was just a wrestling with the Lord and with my faith of how does this look when tested, and what
True.
does God have to say about it? And really, like the title of my book, what is hope in this
Yeah.
case?
Yeah.
Um, I almost named it my book, Pain That Pauses. And as I was writing
Mm,
it, I was like, that's not the message. This is
mm.
not a pain that pauses. This pain has actually brought life to me that I would
Wow.
never have believed without living it. So, yeah, it's about hope.
Wow. Yeah. Pain can become this catalyst for us for, to your point, this spiritual journey that we would have never asked for, but also as you walk through it. I'm not even going to say as you're on the other side of it, because that's
Mm-hmm.
not the story. And that's not often the story with people battling with chronic pain. But as you're walking through it, you almost go, while I wouldn't have asked for this, I wouldn't trade this for the world too. You
Mm-hmm.
start to begin, as Elizabeth Elliot calls it, you begin to understand the gain of loss
Mm, yeah.
and what God brings in the richness of that. You alluded to the woman who had 12 years, right? That she was
Mm-hmm.
expending everything, but then she had this moment where she touched the hem of the garment of Jesus and she experienced, in poof, this healing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which
Yeah.
is the story we all want. We look at the gospels and sometimes we can almost be disillusioned and going, oh, that's going to be the story. Sometimes, as my counselor says, sometimes God does heal in poof, but most of the time he
Mm-hmm.
heals in process. And it's a different kind of healing than what we often would want, or what we our preconceived notions are, what we would anticipate. So
Mm-hmm.
as you're wrestling through this spiritually, when that thing turned from just a physical battle to now it's a spiritual battle, what were some of the early on questions you had, the early
Mm-hmm.
on doubts and disillusionments with God? Like, what did you have to begin wrestling down spiritually in the early parts of this You can't even call it a diagnosis, but like the early
Yeah,
parts of this journey.
journey. Yeah. I mean, there are a few big questions that come to mind. And a huge one is, does God care? I
Mm,
think it's so easy to think, well, I know he cares about my spiritual good. I know that's the primary focus. But does he care about my physical good? Does he care that I'm grieving? And I believe the answer is absolutely yes. I
wow.
look at John 11 and Jesus weeping at the
Yeah.
death of Lazarus, minutes before he already knows he's going to work a miracle and work good from the situation. But he
Mm,
still weeps and he's deeply troubled, it says, because of what he sees his friends experiencing. And we
right.
know from elsewhere in scripture, he calls us friends. So that gets to apply. And I think there's
Wow.
such a power there. Um, and there's other questions too. I mean, am I like, will I be healed? What does the Bible actually say about that? Or like, is there scripture on that topic?
Right.
Am I being punished? What's going on here? Like, is this a reaction to something that I've done?
Mm,
Um, even just this isn't necessarily a question, but like, I guess the question in it is, am I crazy or is this actually hard?
right.
Because
Right.
I felt crazy for so long of
Yeah.
like, I am really struggling, but like we had a conversation
Yeah.
prior to this
Yeah.
where you mentioned chronic pain isn't an acute pain. You can't just point to one moment.
Yep.
So it feels a bit hard to explain and almost invalid.
Yeah.
Um,
You have to imagine, and people that I've talked to with this, they feel like I can't even talk about this because I feel like people look at me like, oh, you're just making a big deal out of nothing, or it just becomes a space of invalidation that
yeah.
can cause you to go, I mean, really, am I? Like, am I
Hmm.
like somehow totally taking this thing and it's not really what it is, or what, I'm sure it's
Yeah.
so confusing.
And a lot of people that I've talked to have had negative experiences with
Yeah.
healthcare providers that do invalidate them. And
Right.
I am pro healthcare. I'm not
Right.
bashing anyone,
Right.
but there's still going to be good providers and more poor providers. And some of them really like, well, I don't see anything on the scan. You're actually fine. Are you just stressed? It's like,
Right.
hmm, that hurts.
Yeah, that's I mean, absolutely. There are so many mysteries within healthcare that you're right. Western medicine may not be able to detect. And you look at it and you go, hey, everything checks out. You seem fine with all of our
Mhm.
signs and readings and all, the scans and everything that we've done. But you know this, and I know this, and the space that my wife is in, that's usually when people go to see my wife, is they're like,
Mhm.
okay, I've got no answers right here, but there's still something that's very prevalent. And
Mhm.
it becomes this almost this mystery, as you describe, like a matrix that you have to look through and go, all right, how do we peel back some of this stuff and find,
Mhm.
is there a root cause to this? And even when you find the root cause, you may not experience the healing of in the hem of his garment in poof the way that the woman did in
Yeah,
the story of the Gospels.
right. My Bible study was recently studying in the book of Mark and just the purpose of miracles.
Mm,
And, miracles that we see in the time of Jesus on earth, a lot of them, their primary purpose was to validate who Jesus is. And so it
yeah.
was like a healing, but it was based on building faith in the person
Mm,
of Christ. And I think sometimes being on a journey actually is what builds our faith more than that instantaneous healing. It's like the
wow.
long path that actually drives us into a deeper faith. And we see, little answers to prayer, almost like these Easter eggs on the journey of like,
Wow.
oh, I prayed for that specifically and I saw it. And like I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt, like he's real. He's really, really real. And I've seen him in my life. And I couldn't say that in the same way before chronic pain.
Yeah.
I believed it, but it's been deepened. My faith has.
Yeah. How does this impact your prayer life? Because
Mm.
there's, if you could take the two extremes, kind of the two ditches, if you will, that we can fall into is like, we can fall into the camp that goes, all right, well, I don't necessarily believe that God does miracles anymore. He doesn't heal and poof. That this is, that was just as and this is not what you were saying, but if you go to the far extreme of what you were saying, this Bible study was talking where you go, that was only that there's no experiences of healing anymore, right?
Right.
So why even pray about it? Maybe I should give up or abandon hope that God's going to heal me. Or you can go to the other ditch and everything is sensational and it's like, hey, you just need to have enough faith. And if you have enough faith, then God's going to heal you. And right, you've got these massive polarizing extremes.
Mm-hmm.
God's usually calling us somewhere right in the middle of that to hold tension of both believing and having faith that he can heal and then also finding contentment and finding him in the spaces we don't. How has this impacted your prayer life and your interaction with God?
That's so good. I mean, first of all, I agree. Both of those ditches have their pitfalls and really can be damaging. The woman, if she didn't reach for the hem of his garment, she wouldn't have been healed. Like 12 years in, she still reached. And
she
I think
still had the
that's
faith to,
yeah. I mean, that's powerful. And yet on the flip side, some of that you just need to have more faith and then you'll be healed can be really damaging and just cause a lot of questions about yourself and your situation that really aren't rooted in scripture. And I think that where my prayer life has landed, one of the things that has been most helpful for me is actually learning to pray specific prayers. Because I found for a while, it was like, Lord, heal me. And that was like the only prayer. And then you can be like, well, my prayer hasn't been answered in 8 years. Like, I don't know if he's real. But when instead it's like, Lord, would you guide me to a doctor that can help me make progress? And then we make progress. Or, Lord, I really need to see this provider, but I can't because of the pandemic. And then he shows up in your other doctor's office. That happened to me once,
True.
It's like, what? Like, I'm seeing him on this journey. I prayed, Lord, I want to go home and I also want to finish school. And that was in 2020. And COVID happened and I went home a week later from praying that, which is, I just kind of dropped that out there, but that situation was so pivotal in my own life and in my journey. Like that's kind of a kingpin story for me, that God just used to strengthen me and remind me, like, I know you think that you need to be healed to get a breath of fresh air, but like I provide those breaths, whether it's through full healing or just a relief in some way like that. So that's something I encourage a lot of my friends in too, who are walking through these really heavy things of like, are you praying specific answerable prayers, things that you can, kind of put a check mark by and say, oh, like he sees me, I'm known, but I still need to surrender, this outcome to him.
Yeah. Wow. That's so good. It's almost like our prayer, if we pray really general, broad brush stroke prayers like, God, would you heal me? We can almost miss the little miracles along the way of him actually healing, both physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, all of those things. And we can miss the moments of God leading us and guiding us. So what I'm hearing you say is like, some of those prayers is almost like, hey, God, would you lead me? Would you guide me every step today? In fact, in your book, you talk about this idea of manna, which is, I love this. I had not heard this manna mindset phrase turned the way that you're turning it. And I want you to explain that. But it is such a powerful concept for us to wrap our hearts around.
I love it because it's so simple, but it still speaks to me really every day. And so, what Davey's referring to is the manna mindset, which is a little phrase that I coined based on the story of the Israelites in the wilderness with the manna. And the idea of it is that God provided the manna every morning
Mm.
for that day. And if they took tomorrow's manna, it would
Hmm.
spoil. And so often I find myself taking tomorrow's manna, tomorrow's provision, thinking, well, God, how are you going to provide for me tomorrow? I don't think I can do another day like this. You know, worrying about the future, projecting today onto tomorrow. But what I'm learning is that we don't have God's grace for tomorrow today.
That's right.
We have daily mercies that are new every morning, and it really is sufficient.
Mm.
And when life gets overwhelming, it's like, okay, look where my feet are, look at the moment in front of me. Can I just do today?
Mm.
And you can with his strength.
Mm. Mm. I love that. I mean, just the concept of this, sometimes people can look at the manna story and they can think about like God's provision, especially in a Western mindset. We think about material provision, like, oh, okay, well, I'm going to trust God with daily bread. He's going to provide for me financially. He's going to provide for me. And we got food, shelter, that kind of stuff. But this is, I mean, Jesus even like really in John 6, he turned it again spiritually. He's like, no. This is about spiritual provision. This is way more. This is your whole being that God is providing for daily. And
Yeah.
to worry about tomorrow is ultimately going to spoil and sour what's going on in your soul.
Mm-hmm.
But to beg God today, hey, can I just today, you promised that you're going to give me manna, grace for today. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to consume that, be content in that. And tomorrow, whenever that stress or worry comes, the manna is going to come to tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. Because there are those
Wow.
moments where, for me, it could be after a failed treatment. Those were some of the most intense days. But where there is just this grief, and I'm sure you're familiar with it, probably to a greater extent than I am, but right in the day after a hardship, you really don't feel like you can do another day. And
Yeah.
you're really not, you're not even sure like what you're saying you can't do tomorrow, but it's like, I think just life, like I'm so overwhelmed. My emotions are at
Yeah.
capacity. And it's really just God saying, like, he's going to provide, like, literally grace. Like, just maybe it's for the very next step. Like,
Right.
get up and do the dishes. Like, I will help you. And it's those small steps that he's just right there with us and
Mm.
asking us not to look too far ahead.
Mm. One of the things I know in people's pain journey, what it does or it forces them to confront is their theology of pain and suffering. Theology, obviously, meaning, what we believe about God. And because of that, what we believe about ourselves and what we believe about the world. We talk about this in the Pain to Purpose course, that the very first session of it is, if God is such a loving God, how could there be pain and suffering in this world? And what can I do about mine?
Yeah.
And it really is peeling back this idea of having a theodicy or a theology of suffering, which is very difficult for us to grasp as Western Americans, whose life tends to be built around comfort, convenience, safety, and security. That's what we're building our lives around. You talk about this in the book, the idea of, and I'm sure that you've had to wrestle through, what do I believe about God now? It's probably deconstructed a lot for you. Can you talk about the importance of that and what that journey has been like for you and what you believe about God?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, this is so huge. And I think unfortunately, it's one of those things that when you're in suffering, it's like 10 times harder than
Yeah.
before. So it helps to have built a framework of suffering. It's still going to be challenged when you're in it.
Right.
But, people write entire books on this topic, and there
Yeah.
are like
Centuries.
yes,
Greater minds than ours have
for
been
sure.
talking about this.
So I will not claim
Yeah.
to be the guru by any means. But I think that sometimes breaking it down into simple terms is really helpful for me.
Yeah.
And, I was reading in James this morning, and it says, God is not tempted by evil, and he himself tempts no one with evil.
Mm.
And so I think sometimes when terrible things happen, there's this tendency to think if evil is actually involved, like, oh well, God did that, and there's debate on this, right? Did God cause it? Did He allow it?
Right.
I don't have all of the answers, but if He's not tempting anyone with evil, I don't think that He is causing evil.
Right.
Um, but He's sovereign. He could absolutely stop and prevent anything from happening.
Right.
So when something does come through His allowance to us, then there's this question of like, well, what do I do with this? And why did He allow it? Why didn't He stop it? He could have.
Mm,
And as much as this verse gets repeated, that's when I think we have to come back to Romans 8:28
that's
of
right.
for those who love God and who are called according to His purpose. That's us.
Mm,
He's going to work all things together for good. And it includes your chronic pain. It includes anything that happens to us. And then I think it's a slow process to, I mean, it might be cheesy, but I would say learning to dream with God of
mm,
what would you have in this? How do you want to redeem it? Because if that's the promise, He's going to do that. But I also think we can kind of stay sidelined and
yeah.
stay out of it, or we can engage with Him and be part of seeing that redemption. And I mean, that's been for sure the biggest blessing of my chronic pain is now like seeing it touch the lives of other people. That
Yeah.
is like, it redeems so much of it. And I'm
Yeah.
sure that's been your
Yeah.
experience as well.
Yeah. I remember reading the book Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering by Timothy Keller. And it was very instrumental the year, I read it in 2016, right after Amanda passed. And it was, he said, God allows evil or gives evil enough space that it ultimately terminates itself.
Mm,
That God in His providence and His sovereignty, He knows exactly how much evil to allow through,
mm,
that it becomes a catalyst to undo the work of the enemy.
mm. That's crazy. I
And
love
it's like,
that.
whoa, yes, that's so true. And I mean, the key is what you're saying, Olivia, is that if we will engage and partner with God, if we will, I love that phrase that you said, if we'll dream with God, right? God,
Mm-hmm.
how could you be using this? It shifts our questions. It shifts us from the why that we are so apt to want to ask, which is
Mm-hmm.
right and true and good. And everyone's going to ask that why. But if we stay in that why, that's when we end up kind of just finding ourselves in this like endless vortex, this like hamster wheel where we don't find any forward motion and
Mm-hmm.
healing. And so it shifts our question from why to like what or how, or like, what are you doing in this, God? What do you want from me? How do you want me to walk through this? There is a dreaming again that happens where God can then bring a redemption or a turning on evil,
Mm-hmm.
to undo the work of the enemy in your life.
Yeah.
And I love that's been part of your journey. I mean, here we are, we're talking someone who, for me, experienced a big T tragedy, you experiencing these like this, like what we call little T trauma, not to like diminish it's not the
Yeah.
size of it. It's like this, like death by 1,000 paper cuts kind of experience. We all experience one of these two, sometimes a combination of these two things. And yet we're still finding that God is faithful and He is the same through all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's powerful.
Mm. What would you say to someone who, because they can hear us say, all right, Romans 8:28, God's using these things, right? This is not something that we're slapping some kind of Christian phrase onto. This is a
Mm-mm.
hard fought battle that you're earning. Olivia, I know that what would you say to someone who's like, yeah, but that's not worth it to me?
Mm. Yeah. Well, my initial thought, I have to think about how I would phrase it to them, but
Mm,
is that God says that like the suffering that we face is not even worth comparing to the glory that is to come.
true.
And I think that the reality of that is that anything done for Christ is worth it and we will not be disappointed. But for that person, there is a miss, maybe an undervaluing of heaven that's happening, and
Mm,
a kind of broken or false understanding of the actual glory that is ours in
yeah.
Christ. Which of course we're all there, right? None of us
Right.
actually
Of
get
course.
it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
No
I
eye has
mean,
seen, no ear has heard, but no mind can fathom what God has for those who
right.
love him, you know? But
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that that is a piece of it, is that
Mhm.
this life is short. My grandpa, who actually passed right after the book came out, and it was dedicated to him.
Mm,
So it was a really powerful thing. But
wow.
he would do this illustration. He had a yardstick, and he would snap off 1 inch, and he'd be like, "This is your life," and then he'd
Mm,
hold the rest of the yardstick, and he'd be like, "And this is eternity."
mm,
And it's even a small example. Like, it's not even
right.
accurate. But when you look
Right.
at that and you're like, which one are you living for? It
Mm,
feels so foolish to live for the inch. Um, but so many of us are doing it. I do it. Like, I'm convicted even as I talk of this, of ways that
yeah.
I am not living for eternity. But I think, going back to what I was saying, for that person, realigning your view of eternity and really even of the authority of the Bible. Because if the Bible is saying that, then we know it's true. And we have
Yeah.
to view our circumstances through the lens of the Bible and not the other way around. Um,
Right.
but really, I think that if that's you, or if you're kind of in that thought process, pray
Mm,
and ask God to do the change in your heart, because it's not going to come from you. And then surround yourself with people that think and live the way you want to think and live,
mm,
and be influenced by positive peer pressure and godly community, and allow that to take place over time, because it can take some time to kind of unwind from tragedy or trauma or hardship.
yeah. Yeah. Wow. So good. So good. Yeah. It's interesting how pain uh, will provoke a greater view of heaven for
Mm-hmm.
us if we'll let it. You know,
Yeah.
it becomes this like you begin to get untied and untethered to the trappings of this world. You know, what does the old hymn say? The things of this world grow strangely dim
I love
in the
that.
light of his glory and grace. And that really becomes very true when you're in the middle of the valley of the shadow of death, where you go, all right, I see just how worthless most of this life is. It's going to be hay and stubble in the end. So
Yeah.
let me build my life around the thing that's going to last, that really truly is going to last. I'm curious, Olivia, how writing this down, like all of this stuff, has been helpful to you, because I know that, it was really helpful for myself to actually begin to put some of these thoughts on paper. It almost began to, I don't know if it like crystallized it or if it began to give me a little bit more meaning and understanding around what I was going through. But we all know that writing is a very good therapy in and of itself. But for you,
Mm-hmm.
how did this really help you as it began to shape some of your thoughts about God, thoughts about what you were going through?
Yeah. It really was helpful. It sounds kind of funny, but I think I would do it for myself, even if it never went
Yeah.
anywhere.
Yeah.
Um, I felt like I had been holding on to all this stuff in my head, these ideas of what God had been teaching me, these passages of scripture that had meant a lot to me. But at the same time, all the hurt that I was sorting through, and all of the
Mm,
pain and the hardships, and almost not wanting to let any of it go, because I needed all of it to like form some meaning from it. But as I began to put pen to paper and write it down, it really did let me kind of almost take a spectator's seat on my life and like
mm,
look at it from the outside. Um, and then simultaneously, sort through and actually reflect on all that God had done and put more order to those thoughts. And
Yeah.
as I did, I mean, it was growing and it affected me, and really just, I think, brought a deeper healing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think that you've mentioned your book was written during the wrestling as
Oh
well.
yeah. It wasn't something that was like after the fact. In fact, I pushed back on anybody who tried to initially tell me, "Hey, you should write right now." And I'm like, "No,
Hmm.
I don't know if I have anything to say. Like I feel like I'm wrestling through a whole lot of stuff right now. Maybe when I have the answers
Hmm.
and when it's turned into some cute cliche, these pat answers that pastors tend to bring to the table, maybe that's when I'll write, right? That's what essentially what I was saying without knowing I was saying it. And these people were like, "No, you need to write right now." Because
Yeah.
this is really where the in the crucible this is the crucible of where God does his best work in our
Yeah.
hearts, and it's in the raw, the real, the wrestling. And it does bring, we've been called to partner with God as part of the cultural mandate to, just like Adam and Eve were, just like what God demonstrated in creation, to help to bring order out of chaos.
Hmm.
And that's what God wants to do in the middle of the chaos of our pain. But there's a partnership he's calling us into. And sometimes there's still, like, as you said, there's chaos that's going on in your heart and your mind. And until it gets out of you and put into some kind of order, that even psychologically, even from like a psychosis standpoint, the way
Mm.
God built us to work, it doesn't get properly filed until we're actually able to start creating some of these God aligned narratives with what we've gone through. And we've put
Yeah.
that down on paper. And it's a beautiful thing. Is why I'm always encouraging people to write, whether they feel like they're able to be published or not, doesn't matter. Just write it down
Yeah.
and begin to create stories that are going to be for you and for your kids and the people you love around you.
Yeah. And I feel like for me, I couldn't write the exact same book now. You
Yes.
know, I'm just far enough along that I'm not in the midst of that same wrestling and that same intensity that I was when I wrote it.
Yes.
And that just brought about a different type of honesty and just,
Mm,
I think I would have whitewashed some of it, if I were writing it now, of like, oh, it wasn't really that bad. No, it was.
yeah.
It definitely was, but I couldn't write that now. And so I'm just grateful that it was down on paper then,
Yeah.
and in a way that's just more organic for people to relate to and
Phew,
be like, yeah, I'm right there right now.
that's so good. Talk to me a little bit about the impact people, community had in your story. Because
Hmm.
while we were talking earlier about the fact that this can feel very isolating and it can almost feel like your people don't understand, so they just don't know how to walk with you. Was there a season or was there a place where community really did provide an impact for you that was like, man, it carried me?
Oh yeah, yeah. So for me, I remember, yeah, it was during college. My freshman and sophomore year were the most intense of my health struggle. But also, I had moved away from home and I was building a new community. And it was so hard for me because of a few things. But one was that I wasn't like the person that I used to be. Like, I wouldn't feel good in the evening. So I just wasn't
Mm,
like, I don't want to hang out. I was going to
right.
go, like, maybe lay in bed. And like, I just, like, that felt so counter who I am that I
Mm,
was like, no one here even knows me. It was kind of like the feel. And there were some that did and that I was able to open up to. But I think there was an element of kind of hiding and keeping some of it back and just not knowing how to relate to others. And so just kind of like turtling inside of
right.
myself.
Right.
And my junior year was a switch. I ended up living with some girls that I knew really well. And those friendships became an anchor to me. And
Mm,
I loved my roommates from all the years, but those were just like best friends. And I opened up more to them, and they just became this home to me, um, where I found just a comfort and even an enjoyment in my pain that like I didn't know was possible.
Yeah.
And yeah, and they pointed me to Christ. And but I just found that like when you're doing life with people, sharing vulnerably, when they can walk into your room and see you crying and be like, hey, I'm actually just going to sit here and pray with you. And then we're going to have a chill night and
Right.
like I'll be there. That really matters.
Wow.
So, yeah.
For those who are, maybe they don't feel like they have that kind of community, or they feel like their community is not, safe to kind of use that term, or they feel like it's been, whether it's, invalidated or diminished the pain, so they're like, I just don't know how. What would you say if you were like sitting across the table having coffee with somebody, mentoring them, and they're experiencing, they're going, Olivia, I don't feel like I have that. I don't know where to find that. What should I do? How do I create that? What
Hmm.
kind of advice would you give them?
Yeah. Well, this sounds a little funny, but one thing that I would do is think of like, who is someone that is suffering or has suffered and walked through it well?
Mm,
Um, that is someone that I would reach out to. And usually, kind of, at least in chronic pain, there's kind of this feeling of like, my suffering's not big enough. They will think I'm
right.
silly. But that hasn't been my experience. People that have suffered in ways we would consider greater than us, so often there's an empathy that's been forged, there's an understanding,
Yeah.
there's a wrestling through really similar questions, even when their suffering looked a lot different than ours.
Yeah.
Um, and so I would really start there. And, if it's someone who is actively in a really intense situation, like be aware of their needs and,
Mm,
try to be a life giver, not a leech,
yeah. Right.
maybe that's a way to kind of get your eyes off of yourself too.
Mm,
Um,
wow.
but it can be, yeah, I mean, I just think that the value of someone who has walked a hard path is unbeatable, and they will probably be a
Yeah.
safer spot than you imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of the beauties of community, whether it's community that is going to surround you and you surround them out of the theme or motif of suffering in your life, or whether it's just community that you have experienced that, like, Dietrich Bonhoeffer says, if we bring to the table only what we need from community, then we're
Mm,
going to unravel what community can do for us.
yeah.
That, like, I love that, even what you just said, that if we can one, find a fellow sufferer, right? Someone who's compassionate because they're suffering with,
Hmm.
um, and we can come and maybe talk to them. They're going to feel that they're going to have this empathy. They're going to suffer with you well. But if we can even be mindful of, like, what can I bring to the table to encourage and minister to them? That's why God connects people, is because there's an aspect and a facet about God that you understand that I don't understand, but I need you in
Mm,
order to understand that,
I love
and
that.
vice versa. And so the beauty of any kind of community is thinking, how do I come to give? And when I come to give, there will never be without.
Yes. And not to beat a dead horse, but we, I think are in a really pivotal time in community, just with the way that technology has affected the world.
Phew. Yeah.
And I mean, I could go on, it's kind of a tangent of mine, but
You can
it,
go on that tangent if you want to, Olivia. It's
I
totally fine.
mean, I just think one of the things my husband and I talk about a lot and we're really passionate about is asking good questions and
Mm,
being like just caring about other people's lives. And it seems that everyone is almost like waiting for the other person to initiate.
mm,
Um, there feels like there's this kind of gap where like you sit next to someone and you're on a plane and like you both pop in your earbuds and don't even say hello. And, this might be something more personal than that, but you're at church with someone you've known forever and you've never asked them like a deep question because you don't want to be nosy. And
Right.
I just think we're missing out on a great
Wow.
opportunity. And a lot of it requires like 30 seconds of courage.
Wow. Wow. That's so good. Even as you're talking about this, I think about some of the most meaningful. I mean, you used the example of a plane ride, right? Some of the most
Yeah.
meaningful plane rides that I've had. And I travel often. And so
Hmm.
honestly, very often I'm exhausted when I get on a plane. I'm just got done preaching, or I'm like, or I want to kind of
Hmm.
go and turtle a little bit, get into my own podcast, like, put my earbuds in or read my own, read a book, whatever. And I just kind of want to create my own space. But some of the most meaningful plane rides I've ever had is when I turn to the person next to me and just start asking them questions. And the
Hmm.
reason it's meaningful is because inevitably God has providentially put that person right next to me, because God knows that they're going through something that I can offer to them some kind of hope.
Yeah.
Because as I share with them, hey, let me share a little bit of my story, my journey, my experience. It's like what happens in their heart then when I share how God has shown up for me, whether they're a believer or not.
Hmm.
It's like that right there becomes this beautiful moment that in turn brings me this like spiritual energy of
Yeah.
purpose that gets me out of my own, like proclivity to turn inward and just like worry about myself, my self absorption. And it's like,
Hmm.
it does this beautiful thing in me that turns my eyes toward heaven again. It re-energizes me. And so here I was trying to energize myself by closing off but giving to somebody. This is literally playing out in front of me. God refreshes those who refresh others.
Mm. Yeah.
And
So
and so I
good.
love what you're talking about. It's like, if we can just ask really good questions and be interested in somebody else's life, we would be surprised at the benefit then that we would receive
Mm.
from that.
Yeah, for sure. Because, yeah, there is always this kind of secondhand blessing that kind of turns back on you. And yeah, it's easy to miss out. I know I'm convicted of that often, but
Mm,
it's kind of
mm,
a standing challenge to myself and others. Like, let's do
yeah.
this. Yeah.
Yeah. Olivia, what would you say to somebody, kind of as a closing remark? They really feel like they're in a battle right now, and their heart is heavy. They're experiencing a lot of pain physically and emotionally because of that. They're wondering where God is in the middle of this. How would you encourage them out of your own journey?
Yeah.
You've already in the last 45 minutes encouraged us greatly. So I'm not, but just kind of like as a final word, if you're really trying to give them just this, hey, let's hold on to hope. What does that look like?
Yeah. Well, I love the reminder that God is a storytelling God and he delights in redeeming our stories, your
Mm,
story. And, there's not a single moment of what you're going through that he's not going to redeem.
yeah.
And you may not see that all on earth, but you will see it in heaven someday. And I think that's a place to just plant your heart, plant your feet, and continue to remind yourself of. Um, but also, don't go it alone. Find
Yeah.
people, find community. If it is chronic pain, I hope you pick up my book. It's a
Yeah.
pen pal, like it's a series of letters. And,
Yeah.
I just want to be kind of a comrade in the fight. But yeah, take it day by day and keep fighting.
Mm, so good. This has been so encouraging and such a rich conversation, Olivia. I mean, just to
Mm,
hear the depth of, um, the depth of understanding and wrestling that you have gone through. And because of that, it's forged a lot of understanding in who God is and who you are and how to minister and help other people. And it's just this has been just so enriching to me. I know for the people who are listening to this, especially as they're going through chronic pain, I know that you've really encouraged their hearts. So I want to
mm,
encourage everybody, get a hold hope, be redundant there, but go. We're going to put links at the bottom of this where you can get your copy. If you're watching this on YouTube, right at the bottom of the YouTube, in the show notes. If you're listening on a podcast platform, Hold Hope, Encouragement for Christians with Chronic Pain. And Olivia, where can we follow you and just tune into a little bit more of what you're doing and the message you're carrying?
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty active on Instagram. That's probably the best place to find me. It's at Letters to Hold Hope. And my website is the same, letterstoholdhope.com. And yeah, please reach out, DM me, anything. I love to connect.
That's great. Well, thanks for spending time with us today. This has been awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. This has been a blessing to me. And yeah, you're a good one to talk to.
Likewise, Olivia. This has been such a blessing to me too. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks for joining us for today's episode of the Nothing is Wasted podcast. We hope you enjoyed our conversation and found it as encouraging and insightful as we did. Now, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you like to listen, and leave us a rating and review. Your feedback helps us to connect to those who need these stories of hope and healing most, and to reach more listeners just like you. Also, subscribe to our Nothing is Wasted Ministries YouTube channel. Now be sure to stay connected with us on social media. You can follow us at Nothing is Wasted Ministries. Follow me at Davey Blackburn. We'd love to interact with you, so be sure to stop by and let us know how these conversations are impacting you and your story. And if you want to learn more about all the incredible resources we have available to help you navigate whatever valley you're walking through, visit our website at nothingiswasted.com. If you're ready to get started in your journey towards healing and finding purpose in your pain, we'd love to help. Simply go to nothingiswasted.com/start here for your next step. We want to thank our guests, and we want to thank you, our Nothing is Wasted community, for tuning in regularly. Remember, no matter what challenges you face, whatever pain you are walking through, nothing is wasted. We'll see you next time for another incredible conversation here on the Nothing is Wasted podcast. But before you go, check out this short clip from our next episode. Thanks for joining us, friends.
I started wrestling with, man, what would it look like when storms of life come, instead of trying to herd up or outrun them or never deal with them, that we just turned and faced them and walked directly into him, trusting the God that knows the storm. Wow. And so that's what the whole book is about. So each chapter is like the storm of anxiety, the storm of betrayal, the storm of depression, the storm of not yet. And it's just a really, hopefully a very honest look of, hey, this is part of our story. This is what we see in Scripture. And this is how you can trust God in anxiety and betrayal and all of these different things.